In the culmination of a decades-long debate, the SEC is finally going to a 9-game conference schedule beginning in 2026. The conference approved that change last week. Welcome into SEC Football Unfiltered, our podcast from the USA Today Network. I'm Blake Toppmeyer alongside John Adams. We will discuss that big news on the scheduling front in this edition of the pod, but also it's week one. After an off season that seemed like it was never going to end, with lots of drama off the field surrounding future playoff formats, debates about scheduling, more debates about NIL and what future that would take. We're back to playing football, and it's supposed to be a great week of football ahead. A jam-packed weekend of ranked opponent versus ranked opponent games. John and I will get into some of the juicier matchups on today's pod as well. And John, let's start there because we'll get to the 9-game schedule on the back half of the pod, but that's a little bit of dated news, I guess, at this point. Happened last week, so we'll save our thoughts on that for the end. But I want to jump right in on the week one action. I mean, as you look at this lineup this week, I mean, it starts Thursday, but it really starts in earnest, I think, on Friday when you have Auburn at Baylor, a very narrow point spread in that game. Then you get to Saturday, number 1 versus number 2, Texas, Ohio State. Another pivotal matchup, LSU goes to Clemson. And then I know this one isn't SEC implications, but it's playoff implications. You have another top 10 matchup on Sunday night with Notre Dame going to Miami, and then also mixed in there, you have Alabama at Florida State and Bill Belichick's college football coaching debut on Monday night. I mean, you've covered so many of these week one affairs throughout your career, John. Maybe this is just being a victim of the moment, but this is about as good of a week one as I can recall in the last several seasons. What's your recollection?
Yeah, at the top, it certainly is. I mean, to think of those two matchups, to me, transcend everything else when you got Texas at Ohio State and LSU at Clemson. I mean, that to me could be a Final Four of the college football playoff. And here you have them all playing in week one. You also have three Heisman Trophy candidates in those two games, maybe 4 if you want to get go beyond quarterbacks. But Garrett Nussmeier of LSU, Cade Klubnik with Clemson, and of course Arch Manning at Texas. Those guys are all getting plenty of recognition as a possible Heisman winner. So yeah, it's just so much. And the thing about it now, because of the playoff ramifications, these games mean so much more, not just to the participating teams, but to the teams within the conference. It means so much for the entire ACC. If Clemson can beat LSU, beat one of the top teams from the SEC, that could pay dividends later on for that conference trying to get perhaps a second bid into the playoff.
Yeah, and speaking of the playoff, John, because this is week one, an all important week one, and because we adore our listeners so much, this is going to be a 2-episode week of the podcast. So we're glad you're here today. A couple days from now, you'll find another episode from John and I in which we're going to make our playoff predictions, but we're going to do it in a little bit of a unique fashion. John's going to pick 6 teams. I'm going to pick 6 teams. We're going to mash them up together for our 12-team combined effort playoff projection, and we'll make sure we stick to the rules of having at least 5 conferences represented as we do that. So check back with us in a couple days for that playoff projection edition of the podcast. But as we wade a little bit deeper into week one here, John, as I look at these 2 headline matchups, Texas, Ohio State, and LSU, Clemson. A couple individuals facing a lot of pressure in these games. Number one, you have the quarterback at Texas, the guy with the last name of Manning. Ever heard of that family. I think maybe you have.
We
Starting
go
for
way back.
yeah, you go back a minute all the way. You know Archie Manning and followed his career very closely, and now it's come full circle to Arch Manning, and he's a quarterback of the number 1 ranked team. No pressure, right? Well, someone else who knows something about pressure is Brian Kelly, coaching a top 10 team in his own right in year 4 at LSU. Now, I think you and I agree, John, Brian Kelly is not on the hot seat at this moment, but he is facing a pressure-packed season as he tries to get LSU into the playoff for the first time since that 2019 LSU team under Joe Burrow went undefeated and won the national championship. So a high-stakes season for Brian Kelly after a high-stakes offseason and an expensive offseason for LSU in which they went big in the transfer portal and got a pretty good haul. Brian Kelly, as we know, has not won a season opener at LSU. He's lost 3 in a row since becoming LSU's coach and was pounding his fist on the table after last year's season opening loss to Southern Cal. So I realize there are 2 different matchups, John, and one's a player, one's a coach, but I'm wondering if I put it to you this way, how you'd answer. Who faces more pressure in week 1? Arch Manning at Texas or Brian Kelly at LSU?
Oh, I think it's Brian Kelly. For some of the reasons you just mentioned, LSU won a national championship with Ed Orgeron as the coach in 2019. LSU fans understandably think, well, hey, we won a national title with Ed Orgeron as our coach, and with Les Miles. Les didn't just provide comic relief with clock management; he got you a national title. So if those guys can win national titles, hello, Brian Kelly, you need to win one too. So that's the least he can do. And obviously, he came to LSU for that reason. He left Notre Dame, where he'd taken 2 teams to the playoff back when there were only 4 teams involved in the playoff. So, yeah, it's pretty much what you knew going in. I think that should have been crystal clear to him, certainly, that a championship is expected, not making the playoffs or winning 9 or 10 games as he's done. So to me, there's more pressure on him. And also because of those 3 opening losses, close games, there's just going to be that groundswell of indignation on the fan base. Like, well, these are the kind of games you're supposed to win.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think with Arch, sure, there's pressure on him, but gosh, I mean, he's the Mannings aren't going to go bankrupt if he doesn't win this game, and it's at Ohio State.
At the defending national champions.
At the defending national champions, and you're the underdog, and you're succeeding a quarterback who, for all his success, 2 playoff bids, didn't give Texas what it wants, of course, a national championship. So he doesn't have that tough an act to follow in that respect. I think they will cut him some slack if he loses at Ohio State. They're playing a championship caliber team on their home field. So I don't think there's a lot of pressure on him for that reason.
I don't know how much slack the national pundits will give Arch Manning, but I do agree with you that of the 2, Brian Kelly, entering his 4th season at LSU, faces more pressure than Arch Manning does in his first start against a ranked opponent. He started 2 games last year while Quinn Ewers was hurt, but against lackluster competition. No comparison to what he'll face in this start against Ohio State. Ohio State will be countering with a first-time starter and a former 5-star recruit of its own. Julian Sayin won the quarterback battle at Ohio State. So a couple of new guys in their positions in that number 1 versus number 2 matchup. They'll have plenty of talent around them. I do think that it's going to be a prime setup for overreaction when it comes to Arch Manning. Either he's going to play well and all the armchair quarterbacks will be ready to hand him over the Heisman, before September even arrives, or if Texas loses, it's, I mean, the reaction, John. It's predictable. It's going to be this overreaction of this guy's a bum, he's a bust, overhyped because of his last name, the whole bit. But I do think you're right. I mean, there's more writing on this moment for Brian Kelly and LSU because of the history, losing 3 straight season openers under Brian Kelly, and because Brian Kelly's been open with the fact of they really emphasize this season opener throughout the offseason. I mean, some of it was kind of hokey, putting Clemson logos around the facility and really making sure everybody knew, everyone in the program knew that this was a pivotal moment in the direction of LSU football, this game with Clemson. But if it works, if they beat Clemson, Kelly will be hailed a genius for placing so much importance throughout the entire offseason on this game. If they lose, I mean, the opposite reaction that's going to form is, oh, he built it up too much in the players' minds and he created so much pressure that they crumbled under it. I don't think any of that really matters, frankly. I think that the team that plays better will win, and it won't really matter that Brian Kelly placed logos around the facility one way or the other. But the case with Brian Kelly is so interesting, though, John, because he hasn't succeeded to the level he was brought in to do. I mean, the man was given a 10-year, $100 million fully guaranteed contract. You bring someone in like that with that deal, you're expecting him to produce a national championship. He hasn't done that, but he also hasn't been a massive bust either. He's won 29 games through 3 seasons. He got LSU. He overachieved in year 1, got LSU to the SEC championship game. He's produced a Heisman winner and Jaden Daniels, and he's won at least 9 games in all 3 of his seasons. So it hasn't been a bust so far, but it also hasn't reached the pinnacle that they brought him in to achieve. And I think, even though I don't think this is a hot season for Brian Kelly, I think we'll know how this tenure is going to end up based on this season. If this season becomes a bust, I don't think that necessarily means Brian Kelly's fired, but I think that means he's not going to reach the pinnacle that he was brought in to achieve at LSU. If he can get to the playoff with this team, that makes me believe that this thing might get to the top of the mountain still under Brian Kelly. And that's where I am right now. As we sit here before the season opener, I'm not out on the Brian Kelly experience at LSU. I think they will make the playoff this season, and I think he still could win that elusive national championship. What say you?
One thing in Brian Kelly's favor, we talk about the difficulty the challenge of playing Clemson in an opener at Clemson. LSU's a 4-point underdog.
Mm-hmm.
Strength of schedule. We've been hearing a lot about this, and supposedly that will be a point of emphasis for the selection committee. LSU's schedule is set up where it could be a 9-3 playoff team. I think that's possible. By playing a game of this magnitude outside the conference, your SEC schedule is going to be pretty difficult just by the nature of the SEC. But adding a game like Clemson on the road, if LSU loses a close game to Clemson, it's not as though it's doomed. Even if it lost,
tell that to their fans.
Well, but the fans don't select the teams for the playoffs.
True. Fair point. Yeah.
So I just think I expect Brian Kelly to do well at LSU. And one of the things that impressed me was this offseason, the way he went about the work in the transfer portal. He wasn't content to say, okay, these are positions of need. This was the work of a man trying to win a championship. Mm-hmm. He's trying to get better at every position. And if you've got the NIL money, which LSU obviously does, that should be the approach. If you can get player A from whatever university, never mind if you have a 2-year starter at that position already on your roster. If player A from Kansas State or wherever is better, go get him. If you can afford him, go get him. I think that's what it takes to win a championship. And he's shown that he didn't do that. He tried to fill positions of need early on and recruit well at the high school level. But this offseason was, we're going to make this roster as strong as possible. And I think he's got maybe the best roster in college football.
Well, and one thing I would add to that, John, when you have a veteran quarterback who's proven and talented like Garrett Nussmeier, we believe he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. You should spare no expense in trying to put the necessary talent around him to go chase this thing being a national championship. When you have a quarterback, you have a chance, but you have a better chance. Case in point, Ohio State last year, if you put some talent around the quarterback. You put a lot of talent around the quarterback. Well, LSU has done that. So they have the quarterback. That already gave them a chance. Now, because of what they did in the offseason in their transfer haul, they have a better chance because of the talent they put around Garrett Nussmeier. Also, lots of talent around Arch Manning. John, we know this. Texas has been accumulating talent for years under Steve Sarkisian. Sarkisian's a good recruiter in his own right, but also Texas has an NIL war chest that few, if any, programs really can match out there. But we were talking about, the Manning surname and kind of making jokes about that, but you do have great perspective on this because you remember Archie Manning's career at Ole Miss well. You covered Peyton Manning's career in its totality at Tennessee, and you monitored from afar Eli Manning's career at Ole Miss. And all of those Mannings had certain expectations, a lot of hype around them, particularly, when you got to Peyton after Archie Manning's star career. Peyton Manning was a ballyhooed recruit, but those guys weren't coming in as a starter for the number one ranked team. In some ways, that's an advantage for Arch Manning. He's got the number one team around him. In other ways, it exposes him to a unique pressure that for all the pressure his other family members faced, they weren't taking over a number one ranked team when they became starting quarterbacks at their schools.
Obviously, someone in Arch Manning's position is going to get all the input he can from his family because these aren't guys that coach Pee Wee football.
Yeah,
these were great players, so they know how not just to play the game, play the position, but how to manage and what to look for. And so I think the very fact that he picked Texas. Archie didn't pick Ole Miss because the talent was around him. He was a Mississippi guy. There wasn't that kind of talent around Archie Manning when he was a quarterback. If he had this kind of talent, he'd have probably won a national championship. He was that good. But Eli went to Ole Miss, followed Archie. Peyton went to a really good Tennessee program at the time, couldn't win a championship. But I think two things stood out with Steve Sarkisian, an offensive-minded guy at Texas. Guarantee you the Mannings believe in his ability to draw up a game plan and to call a play on third down. They trust him offensively, just as they trusted Peyton Manning when he went to Tennessee and worked under the tutelage of David Cutcliffe.
Who then Eli Manning played for at Ole Miss as well.
Eli did too. I mean, you're not going to get up on a whiteboard and dazzle the Mannings with X's and O's. They know the X's and O's. So you gotta have everything really nailed down when you start selling them on your philosophy and what you look for. So understandably, then they believed in Steve Sarkisian as an offensive guy. Also, I think the fact that Texas, we're going into the NIL era, Texas is not going to be shortchanged. It's got the financial resources to compete with anybody. And I think another factor in his going there was that although Texas is in the SEC, it wasn't. It's a newbie. It wasn't a part of this. It's not as though at Texas he's following SEC superstars at quarterback. Texas is a different entity, even though it's in the SEC now. And I think that might have figured into it, as opposed to having to choose. You're going to go to Tennessee where Peyton went, or go to Ole Miss where Archie and Eli went. Yeah, no, you go to a place, and also a bigger city. This is not a college town. Austin's one of the biggest cities in the country. So I think all that factored into it. My point is that I believe he's very comfortable in this situation. So going and playing in Columbus against Ohio State, this isn't the big deal it would be to, I think, a lot of other players. I just think just because he's a first-time full-time starter, I think he's been groomed for this moment in this kind of game.
Yeah, he's no pup. He spent 2 years as backing up Quinn Ewers, getting playing time along the way, getting some spot starts along the way. Whereas Julian Sayin, for all the hype that came with him from the recruiting trail, initially was going to play for Alabama until Nick Saban retired, then reconsidered and signed with Ohio State. He is far less tested even than Arch Manning has been. Let's change gears, John, and get into the news on the scheduling front from last week. After many years debating 8 or 9 games, the SEC has finally added the 9th conference game. This will start in the 2026 season. This does a couple things. Number one, it helps the SEC preserve some secondary and tertiary rivalries. The rivalries haven't been announced, but this is going to set up where each team has 3 rivals that they play annually, and then the other 6 opponents forming that 9-game schedule would rotate through. So that's one thing it does. Number 2, it will help the SEC take advantage of that playoff rule tweak that you had alluded to earlier in the podcast. The playoff committee announced that starting this year, they're going to even more greatly weight wins against good opponents. They're going to penalize teams less that lose to good opponents, and they're going to dilute any rewarding results against lousy teams. Those aren't going to, I don't know if they ever should have mattered, but the playoff committee has said, yeah, we're not going to greatly reward your results against lesser teams. So the SEC is positioning itself, I think, to take advantage in the future, assuming the playoff committee sticks around in the future of the playoff, that the SEC has positioned itself to better take advantage of some of those rules tweaks. And also, we can assume that the SEC will try to squeeze more money out of its media partner, ESPN, by adding the 9th conference game. Overall, we've been talking in favor of more conference games for years, John. So now that it has happened, what are your thoughts on this? Do you see mostly pros? Do you see some cons emerging, I guess, from your seat for the SEC adding this 9th conference game?
No, it's all pros. It's and better now than later, I guess. I wish this would have happened as soon as they said, we just added Texas and Oklahoma. We've got a 16-team league, but we'll just keep playing 8 conference games for the next 2 years. I would be curious about a spontaneous reaction from, say, Brent Venables at Oklahoma or Billy Napier at Florida, who suffered through a brutal interim schedule. It was designed almost to get those guys fired. The Florida and Oklahoma schedule were too much. And I think this will add parity to the schedule. I really like the idea of fans getting to see all the schools more often too. I think that's at home and away. There have been some great players in this league. And if you had a season ticket at an SEC school, home, you just went to the home games, you never got to see in person. Maybe you never got to see, talked about Archie Manning earlier, Peyton Manning, Tim Tebow, Herschel Walker, all the greats that have played in this conference. You might have missed them depending on where your school is and the way the schedule played out. So I think that's an advantage. But I think now when you look at it, the schedule, if you've got a 16-team league, you need to be running these different programs through the schedules. You just don't want to have what we've had with an interim schedule where, say, Tennessee this year gets to play the 4 worst teams in the SEC. Oklahoma and Florida play 6 teams apiece that are nationally ranked, and that's just within the conference. So that's a very unbalanced schedule when you compare, say, Tennessee and Oklahoma or Tennessee and Florida.
Yeah, the higher percentage of your conference peers that you play, the more balanced schedules become. It's some simple math, right? If everybody played all 15 other teams in the conference, the schedules would be remarkably balanced. If everybody only played one other team in the conference, the schedules would be remarkably unbalanced. So the greater percentage of of your conference peers that you play, the more balanced schedules become from team to team. I also like that this allows the conference to keep those secondary rivalries. I mean, rivalries help define the experience of SEC football. And it's not just important to keep games like Texas and Oklahoma. It's also important to keep games like Texas and Texas A&M. It's not just important to keep the Iron Bowl, but games like Auburn and Georgia matter to an awful lot of people. So this allows to keep more of those rivalries going on an annual basis. I like that. The other thing that I thought was huge with this announcement was the SEC is keeping its requirement that all of its members play a minimum of one Power 4 non-conference game or Notre Dame. So at most, SEC teams will be allowed 2 cupcake opponents. They're going to have to play a minimum of 10 games against Power 4 competition. That'll be 9 conference games plus a minimum of 1 non-conference game against a Power 4 opponent or Notre Dame. I like that provision was kept. I think some schools would have done that anyway. Some schools would have continued to schedule a Power 4 non-conference opponent. But if you would have taken away that requirement, you can't tell me that there wouldn't have been a couple SEC schools thinking, yeah, we're not scheduling anybody from the Power 4 in the non-conference. So I like that was kept on the books. This reduces the number of cupcake games that the league will play in totality. That's always been a big point of emphasis for me, for you as well. Let's get rid of some of these cupcake games. This will achieve that. Now, I'd like to see it go a step further and say you're only allowed 1 cupcake opponent maximum, and you have to play 11 games against Power 4 opponents. But baby steps, I suppose. And this at least takes the SEC a step further than where the Big Ten is, because the Big Ten had already been playing 9 conference games, but its members are not required to play a Power 4 non-conference opponent. Now, several Big Ten teams do, like Ohio State hosting Texas, but there are others, like Penn State this year, like Indiana in perpetuity, that duck any non-conference opponent with a pulse. This sort of puts the Big Ten, I think, on its back foot and says, hey, the SEC is going to be playing a minimum. Everybody in the conference is playing a minimum of 10 Power 4 opponents every year starting next season. That's not on the books for the Big Ten. So this cranks up the heat a little bit, I think, for them to maybe consider upping to where their membership are required to play a minimum of 10 Power 4 games, which I think would be good for the whole of college football.
Yes, we watch a lot of college football, not just the games we cover. And you like to watch a game that has some suspense, some meaning. You just, I mean, some of the games we sit through, it's just a cavalcade of scores. It's just one team running downhill, the other one gasping for breath. FCS opponents just forfeit. Well, I don't want to single any school out, Long Island, but I mean, Long Island. Where did Florida come up? How did Florida come up with Long Island? Now, if any team deserved a patsy on its schedule, it's Florida. But I look for these schools to get really creative. They've only got 2 now. They've only got 2 sure wins. It will be, and there's a column. What 2 teams do you go after? There's going to be a battle to get those 2 teams, the weakest of the weak on your schedule. Of course, I'm already on the Kent State bandwagon. Highly recommend them if you're looking for a non-conference game, anytime, anywhere.
Mark Stoops might try to schedule Kent State twice, John, and get both of his cupcakes against Kent State. Although, well, he's got to have one against an FCS opponent, right? An FCS team and Kent State will be Kentucky's lineup, I believe. So, yeah, I mean, I think you're like me. You would like to have seen this go to 11 Power 4 games total, right? But that was never going to happen. And at least At least this now takes the SEC to 9 conference games, and they're keeping their requirement to play a minimum of 1 Power 4 non-conference game. And there's nothing that says SEC teams can't play a second Power 4 non-conference opponent. And I hope several teams decide to do that and put the playoff selection committee to the test of how serious are you about these strength of schedule tweaks. You go out and play 11 Power 4 opponents and amass a 9-3 record, I would think you're in the conversation for the college football playoff. That's not the scenario these 9-3 SEC teams were in last year. Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, they were 9-3 on the playoff bubble, only played 9 Power 4 opponents. You play 11 Power 4 opponents, you've got a better case, particularly now with these playoff committee rule tweaks. I'd like to see some teams push the envelope and get 11 Power 4 opponents on the schedule. I think a lot of schools will take twice about that, but I think some schools might be daring and take that chance.
Well, keep in mind, Blake, that some of these schools are not even thinking about the playoff. That would be the equivalent for their program of thinking about playing a game on a neutral site in planet Mars. It's just not going to happen. They're not going to contend for championship. So they're looking through maybe a bowl lens and saying, how do we get 6 wins? Well, maybe the NCAA next step needs to be bowl eligibility is determined by that strength of schedule is a factor in that, and determine rather than just saying you got to win 6 games. In some cases, you squeak in with 5, but I just think that would be a fair if you played. Well, let's just take Kent State hypothetically, since that's a program close to my heart. If Kent State were an independent and it played 12 nationally ranked teams and lost to all of them, then it should be eligible for the playoff based on strength of schedule.
The John Adams Bowl Game Special, they'll call that one, with Kent State in it. Probably no more conversation about Kent State next week when we get in, or later this week when we get into our playoff projections. I don't think they'll be popping up as one of our 12 picks, but that will be coming to you a couple days from now as we do a 2-episode installment this week, setting the stage for week 1. John and I will be making our playoff projections. Until then, thanks for listening to this edition of SEC Football Unfiltered.